Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Another viewer-requested review today, looking at the solo title of an Avenger I first discovered thanks to the X-Men cartoon. The episode of Rogue's Tale was centered on, well, Rogue, so of course, given where her flight and strength came from, featured Miss Marvel. Not only her first appearance outside comics, according to the Marvel Animated Wiki, but also the first acting gig for her actress, Roscoe Hanford. Firsts all around. However, I never really followed the character, only seeing her as part of an ensemble cast or as a cameo in whatever media. Remember, I was mostly a DC reader, and my collecting wasn't always that expansive. Though I will say, between the flight, super strength, and energy blasts, she was always fun to play in the Ultimate Alliance games. I point this out to clarify how blind I am going into this story. It's not Carol Danvers' first solo, and she has a history I'm unfamiliar with. If nothing else, it's a way to look at this from the perspective of a potential new reader. Would this have appealed to me if I had just seen it on the shelf and picked it up on a whim? Would I be able to follow the events without knowing a whole lot of backstory? How will this fare to someone with limited experience and no real expectations? Let's see what answers we get as I'm taking issue with the first story arc of Miss Marvel Volume 2 from 2006. Written by Brian Reed, with art by Roberto Delatorre, Jimmy Palmiotti, and Chris Sotomayor. Let's see if these comics make us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The first issue's cover features our star floating in front of an American flag backdrop, her name in shiny gold letters with thick outlines. Very uncomplicated, but still quite eye-catching, and I guess popular, or perhaps striking enough, that it was reused for the first trade paperback. We begin with Carol flying a stealth jet, narrating how she'd wanted to fly since she was a little girl. She still wanted to be a princess, just one that could carpet bomb the evil wizard's lair. Right after high school, she joined the Air Force, which aside from paying for college, offered a great experience, since she loves the adrenaline rush. Flying at Mach 4 about 100 feet off the deck in an experimental fighter jet that's invisible to radar? I go weak in the knees just thinking about it. Which becomes kind of tricky because I always put my Slurpee in my lap. Maybe if they'd installed cup holders like I asked. Now that I'm a grown-up and can fly without a plane, well, no one can stop me from having leftover pizza for breakfast while 3 miles in the air. Stilt-Man is running a new suit through its paces, shrugging off bullets and strong enough to lift the armored truck he's attempting to rob. That's when Carol flies in, punches the back of his head, making the obscure villain fall down go boom. But remember, he was lifting a truck, which is now falling. Totally unrelated, some kids are in the park nearby playing superheroes, with the one black kid asking why he always has to be Luke Cage. Because, Jake, you're the only guy who has a black leather jacket. Huh. This feels a little awkward, like maybe they were going for some kind of subtle racial commentary, but since it doesn't explicitly go that far, perhaps that was subversion, a misdirect, that Jake always being Luke Cage wasn't the reason some would think is obvious. And this is more a gag on how young kids might play, with no prejudices intended. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to playing with your friends or siblings as little kids and getting stuck as the same character every time for some reason. Fittingly enough, it's the kid playing Spider-Man who first notices the truck about to crush them. But his spider sense is more peripheral vision. Good thing Miss Marvel flies in and stops the vehicle, lifting it up on a splash page. Hi, kids! Finally, they'll let a girl join their play acting, but only if she has a red sash to tie around her waist. She sets it down safely, getting a hug of gratitude from the driver, when Spider-Kid's keen detection of the obvious alerts her to Stilt-Man's approach. Everything's under control, as she throws the armored truck at the villain, knocking him over again. This has been a flashback Carol is explaining while having lunch with her friend Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman. A flashback that has some embellishment. See, at first we read Stiltsy saying he'd never have attempted this caper if he knew Miss Marvel was around, but Jessica calls this out, saying no one talks like that. Danvers laments that's what she wished he had said, when his real retort was asking who the hell she was. Ouch!
That hurt here and here.
Rather than do something immature like a barrage of unnecessary photon charges, when he used a blaster that came with his new suit, Carol manipulated its energy and repelled it back at him. In his crotch. Accidentally. 7 times, which Jessica finds hilarious.
Next 2 words out of your mouth aren't "see it," then the 3rd word will be, "Oh my God, my crotch, you've punched me in the crotch."
If nothing else, this was a learning moment for Stilt-Man that he should never go to a casino, because 7 is definitely not his lucky number. They changed subjects to a meeting Carol had the other day with a public relations firm, which she says hit her ego worse than a guy on stilts not recognizing her. She'd met with Sarah Day, publicist for superheroes and half of Hollywood. But only the half that never star in bad movies or get caught drunk in a Walgreens without pants and rambling about how the Illuminati are actually run by squirrels. The building is apparently pretty advanced, with sensors to detect and ID flying supers upon landing, which is why Sarah, a longtime fan of Danvers, was quick to meet her when she walked in. She also represents many of her more famous peers, like the Fantastic Four, Captain America, and the X-Men. Doing a real bang-up job with that whole human-mutant relations thing, ain't you, Miss Day? The astonishing X-Men, dear. Astonishing. Proper adjective use is very important. Adjectives? I was told there would be no math. Wait a minute. Weird how Spider-Woman is on Sarah's wall of clientele, but Jessica's dialogue didn't seem to suggest that, like she'd never actually been associated with the company. Anyway, Day summarizes Carol's work history. Air Force, NASA, Avengers, Homeland Security until a few days ago, writing some novels, going by Miss Marvel mostly, except for using binary and the rather dreadful Warbird, which I'm going to have to call this lady loopier than Toucan Sam's morning cereal, because Warbird is a perfectly fine name, a really good one in fact. She also remarked that, while having legs for those boots, her costume could be more than it is. Is she talking about the frequent side boob that's popped up in this issue? Like it needs more material covering her? 'Cause I've seen her more covered up in other stuff I've seen her in, like the X-Men cartoon, and her Marvel Legends figure. Sarah said that if Danvers was going to go on, say, David Letterman or another late-night talk show, she'd need something to promote, and also something that's as interesting as Reed Richards doing science experiments with underprivileged kids. With, not on, let's be clear. She'll need answers at the ready for an interview that the public will remember the next day. She should start small, like a Where Are They Now segment on a show called Superpowers, basically Entertainment Tonight with a superhero focus, which also has a sizable teen male demographic. Speaking of which, they're probably big fans of your boots, too. Does she really think the teenage boys are that focused on just her boots? Are we sure this woman is actually good at her job? Jessica finds it ludicrous that Carol should do a retrospective, but Danvers disagrees. While she's not interested in a popularity contest, the fact that Stilt-Man didn't remember her makes her feel like she could do more with her super career, that she hasn't earned her way or gone above and beyond. Heck, Steve Rogers invited her back on the Avengers because it's her, which Carol interpreted as meaning that she hadn't really earned it. Or you did, and he asked you back because he knows how effective you are, what good you can do, and how valuable you'd be on a team dedicated to stopping threats across the planet. Why did that not cross your mind? Jessica even points out how she was good enough to be on the team before, as well as saving those kids this morning, and apparently kept the sun from exploding not long ago. Yet Danvers replies she spent the following half a year sitting around her apartment watching old movies and eating Ben & Jerry's. Okay, first off, that's some people's idea of heaven. Secondly, with your figure, you must metabolize those calories the second they hit your gullet. Nevertheless, Carol still feels like an also-ran, meaning someone who completes a competition but doesn't even make it to the top 3, though she is convinced she can do more, the kind of person others want to emulate, to be one of, if not the, best ever. That's why she quit Homeland Security, so she wouldn't be stuck behind a desk, have the freedom of more proactive superheroing, like going out on patrol. Jess, having initially thought this was something her friend would get over after a few days, realizes she's serious, so tells Carol to do what she needs to do. She is the best, and should go out and prove it. While we get this close-up of her hand on Carol's, in a way that absolutely wouldn't inspire certain people on the internet. Hey, did someone say something about... Ah! Seriously, you're starting to make me very close to kind of thinking about missing Wynar. Still don't know what happened to him.
Hello, darkness, my old bra. I've come to bring you some coleslaw.
Yeah, as far as I know, these two are just friends. So this could be purely platonic, and that would be my go-to thought, but with this kind of cloudy framing, it makes it feel like it's intended for something more. But perhaps that's just how I think other people would interpret it.
The shipper, able to detect romantic connections where clearly none exist.
C-3PO and Chewbacca are definitely a couple.
So, moving on. That night, she's flying around the city, not waiting for a call like she would on the Avengers, akin to the fire department. This lets her be quicker to respond when, say, a strange glowing object shoots through the sky. I'd never see that if I was just sitting at home. Yeah, but it's 2006, and you're missing a brand new episode of Psych! In South America, Captain America is fighting off some Hydra punks alongside Sharon Carter when he gets a call on what looks like a Nokia 3310. Given how often his shield has been dramatically broken, he keeps that particular model, so he always has something truly indestructible to throw. It's, of course, Danvers, saying she's been following an unidentified bogey for over an hour, and is asking for some of Earth's mightiest to help out. Sadly, Cap is busy kicking necks on a shield mission, and the other Avengers are occupied. Because they're watching that new episode of Psych! He suggests enlisting the Fantastic Four, but Danvers is hesitant because of an incident in Las Vegas with Johnny Storm. So that thing could be a missile about to wipe out a city, but she doesn't want to call a perfectly capable team for assistance because of some vaguely embarrassing trip. Our heroine, ladies and gentlemen.
What's wrong with you?
Since the Star-Spangled Man has his hands full, she's gonna let him go and agrees to call the FF after all, then promptly drops her phone while going Mach 3. She figures she called Steve out of panic and should just do the solo thing she set out to do, continuing her pursuit of the object. Not used to flying so fast for so long, her chest starts burning as the object starts losing altitude over Spalding, Georgia, and she's not fast enough to stop it from crashing into the parking lot of a restaurant. When she gets closer, lasers fire from the impact zone, one grazing her face. Despite her ability to manipulate energy, it somehow manages to knock her out, leading her to fall onto a truck and go night-night for a bit. When she wakes up, people are screaming and there's sounds of weapons fire, so Miss Marvel orders herself to get up, stop being dizzy, and that she's the only one around to help people in danger. After that self-pep talk, the first issue closes on the threat at hand. The Brood. The one night she leaves home without her can of Raid. Issue 2's cover sees Carol being throttled by one of the aliens, and possibly also screamed at like she owes it money. A pretty jarring image to give a hint as to what may await the reader. We jump back 3 hours to Sarah Day's office, watching an early draft of a promo for Danvers' retrospective, then calling to leave a voicemail message about how great it is and that she's planning her interview for tomorrow. 2 hours back, a few thousand miles beyond the moon, is a Brood space whale ship, where its insectoid inhabitants are battling an enemy they only call Crew, and they don't appear to be winning. Can you believe all this started as a disagreement over what color to repaint the kitchen? The Brood thought it would look good in a nice taupe, but Crew wanted Brood innards. Several escape pods are shot out as the whale is destroyed, and one happens to be what Carol was chasing last issue. On a 2-page spread, she wonders what the Brood are doing here. I mean, they've been to Earth before, so she's just saying this out of, frustrated surprise. Then she starts going on the offensive. A few energy shots, a thrown sedan, crushing a couple with a hunk of rubble, and wow, she looks like a completely different character here, almost like it's from another artist. A little odd, but maybe to show the intensity of her battle fury. They try swarming her and referring to her as it, which really doesn't help them, and though she does fight many of them off effectively, eventually some manage to ensnare her, trying to kill her as quickly as possible. Overwhelmed and being crushed, she fights back more fiercely as her foes mention Crew, who's already arrived, using some manner of energy weapon that eliminates the Brood and knocks Carol out. Again. All this battle-related unconsciousness is seriously going to mess with her sleep cycle. When she comes to, she notes that for all the things in the galaxy she's been witness to, Crew is certainly a first. A lithe, oblong-headed blue creature with cybernetic enhancements. These Avatar sequels are really reaching for new ideas. She tries communicating with the alien, introducing herself as a friend, as it scans her. It responds by grabbing her throat. I shoot its head off, and it grows right back. Dang it, I'm fighting an anime villain, aren't I? Its hand tendrils begin zapping her face with pink electricity, leading Danvers to see a cavorite crystal and an army base, images being pulled from her mind before she's tossed aside. It flies off, and though she tries, she's too weak to follow right now, as survivors pull themselves from the rubble. Like Stilt-Man, they don't recognize Danvers either, some wishing a more famous hero had arrived instead, but they were probably busy. I know they've been through a traumatic experience, which may be responsible for a knee-jerk reaction that emphasizes the jerk, and though it does feel a little exaggerated, it kind of reflects a real-life fallacy people have that if something is popular or has high ratings, for example, that somehow equates to trustworthiness or facts. It doesn't, but I digress. Carol drops down into this surprisingly deep crater to the Brood escape pod, telling any that may be listening that if they're lurking about, they should show themselves now. And if we could, let's just skip the whole ambush me and make me fight for my life thing, because I am so incredibly tired. Also, give me a minute to check if I've got any new likes on my last Instagram post. Indeed, there are some creatures left, whom she promptly dispatches, though sparing one for questioning. It explains that crew had been hunting the Brood to the point of near extinction, so they decided on a final stand. They'd somehow managed to convince their enemy that cavorite crystals could be weaponized, and having detected a large cache of them near this town, it was their hope that crew would use its ability to channel radiant energy on the crystals, which would likely destroy their threat. Danvers points out this would also wipe out half the planet, but the Brood figured this was an acceptable outcome.
Hey, we check your people's social media feeds. You can't tell me all those memes about wanting the world to end now are all being sarcastic.
The lizard bug thing confirms it's the only Brood left on this escape ship, which is fine and dandy for Miss Marvel as she fires a killing blast. Taking off as the pod explodes, I assume she did something to cause that, she chastises herself for being stupid. Crew took the information it needed from her mind, and she stayed behind dealing with the Brood when she should have been going after the other threat. So the Brood could kill even more townsfolk? I'm not kidding. Issue 1's establishing panel of the Waffle Hut lists the population as 3,791. And when Carol wakes up to their attack in this issue, the number dropped to 3,752, meaning 39 people were killed in that time. Sure, maybe the pod crash did some of that, but even if it accounted for all those fatalities, does she think the Brood would have stayed behind and played canasta while crew went looking for some blue rocks? But given her work history mentioned earlier and the fact she knows what the Brood are,
she cannot be that stupid.
I mean, they're kind of like the xenomorphs from Aliens. They use other species to propagate their own. Maybe she's just blaming herself for not being good enough to be everywhere at once, doing everything at once, which would play into the larger arc. She's at least aware of what cavorite is from her time at NASA. If the crystals are infused with the right type and amount of energy, they could be a useful power source for anti-gravity devices or even faster-than-light engines. Unfortunately, it's so unstable that the wrong amount can create feedback, and then go explodey, and even an inch of a fragment could wipe out a city block. Someone really went overboard in reinventing those novelty exploding cigars. NASA stopped their experiments and transferred what crystals they had to the McCord Army Base in Spalding, where crew is currently laying waste to the soldiers stationed there. When Miss Marvel arrives, the base built to withstand a nuclear strike is completely wrecked, a grim testament to how powerful this creature is. She rushes as fast as they can to stop it from getting one of the hundreds of crystals, but upon reaching the storage room, crew has grabbed some cavorite the size of its fist and begun absorbing it, while possibly doing what any of us might and doing a He-Man impression. She arrives too late as the rock glows, leaving the last panel of the issue a sheer white. Hey, it's a create your own ending panel. Draw what ending you'd like to see. I apologize for nothing! Issue 3's cover sees her surrounded by the Brood, with one restraining and throttling her. A little misleading, since all the Brood were taken out already, and no more appear in this issue. Maybe that's what they're mad about, and they didn't get as much panel time as expected. Or maybe this was to show Carol's shapely keister. Sure, her life is in danger, but Carol's publicist said it would move copies. We return to the destroyed neighborhood in Spalding, population 2,986, which means 766 people died last issue. Was that how many people were at the army base crew attacked? Yeesh. The townsfolk see a light in the direction of McCord, seeming to get brighter. Rather, it's getting bigger. The pyrotechnicians are going all out for the Kiss Farewell tour. In the upper atmosphere, Miss Marvel is zeroing in on crew, while narrating that she has no idea what she's doing, and hopes to come up with a good idea real soon. Is that Carol talking, or did the writer put their creative block into the script by mistake? She at least takes some solace that the charged-up Cavorite shot the two of them skyward, along with some debris from the base. Bad news, the oxygen in the storage room had burned up before she could take a breath, and now she's suffocating. She dives back down to get some of that sweet, sweet oxygen, but her snarky declaration of love to the air is cut short when she sees an enormous crater that used to be Spalding, Georgia. The town, the military base, all of it, gone. Including that new Durango's Pizza and the theater that was going to host the next Riff Tracks. Oh, that blue jackwagon's going to pay. So distracted is she by the tragedy that Crew sneaks up on her, flying down and slashing her right arm. And yeah, while her horrified face is done really well, this expression doesn't exactly say pain to me. More like someone showed her a picture of something gross or she's about to sneeze. She's starting to go into shock as Crew uses his tech to create a blaster over his hand, powered by the Cavorite, and takes aim at something. It seems to be pointed away from Danvers, so maybe it's going to shoot the moon? Whatever the case, she deals the best left hook she can manage to send the creature back into space, and takes the precaution of a deep breath before following. Breathing is good. Who says comics don't teach you anything? Reflecting on the Brood's plan to take out this mysterious exterminator, Carol doesn't like the part where Earth explodes, but feels much better about the Crew exploding part.
I don't agree with his Bart-killing policy, but I do approve of his Selma-killing policy.
After taking a couple hits from the Cavorite blaster, she hatches the best plan she has right now, which she may not survive. She charges her left hand and punches into the weapon, grasping the crystal as the two exchange contemptuous glares. While not openly stated, one can assume she uses her energy manipulation abilities on the unstable rock, creating an explosion that leaves Crew at its epicenter.
And I never got to see Space Friends!
Where was I just now? Danvers has been shot back to Earth, her narration reminding us that when she was a little girl, she wanted to fly. Fighting an alien cyborg wasn't a big part of that wish, but it wasn't exactly a deal-breaker either. Landing in a snowy wilderness, she sees a burst of blue light, chuckling that her crazy idea worked, as she passes out and reverts to her civilian clothes, because I guess her powers can do that. Handy trick if you can manage it. While she lies unconscious, news reports on the destruction of Spalding, now nothing more than a 15-mile-wide hole. The show plays an earlier clip of Reed Richards explaining how the energy readings seem consistent with the detonation of a large piece of the man-made Cavorite. Again, I urge people not to participate in the Microwave Some Cavorite Challenge, no matter how popular the hashtag is on Twitter. We go to Danvers being discovered by Reed and the rest of the Fantastic Four. She's alive, but badly injured, so Johnny goes to get some medical assistance. She also has some blue gunk on her that Reed isn't familiar with, not seeming to be entirely organic or synthetic, but fascinating as it seems to move around his hand. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how we get the MCU equivalent of flubber. Meanwhile, in low Earth orbit, more of the gooey bits that used to be Crew float and begin to merge back together. He is an anime villain! So when they have their final battle, will Carol annihilate him in a dramatic fight where half the issue is Crew's tragic backstory, or do they end up becoming tenuously friendly rivals? After an unspecified amount of time, Carol has her arm in a sling, hailing a cab to take her back to her building. She's hounded by reporters asking about the incident and how the then-proposed Superhero Registration Act might have changed the outcome, but she's not taking questions. She wasn't sure she'd make it out of that adventure, so she'd rather just relax in the tub, sleep, and wait for her arm to heal. Though even that's a bit of an uncertainty, since Mr. Fantastic wasn't sure what that gunk was made of. When she arrives at her apartment, the comic ends on her finding Sarah Day already there, along with a film crew for her interview with superpowers. That was the first arc of Miss Marvel Volume 1, and I thought it was mostly fine, but I felt some elements were a little off, even with my lack of familiarity with the character. The idea of a hero wanting to be more than they feel that they are can be an interesting and thoughtful journey. Starting a new chapter in a character's life like that is a pretty smart way to begin a new ongoing. But I couldn't tell you how well-founded Carol's feelings are. She seems to just dismiss the accomplishments Jessica reminds her of because she didn't have anything else going on, and Stilt-Man of all people not knowing who she is. She suffers losses largely because the odds were stacked against her. I imagine a lot of heroes on their own or even paired up would have been just as overwhelmed between the Brood and Crew. It feels like there's a meta element at play, that she's trying to prove herself worthy of greater recognition while simultaneously justifying having her own title again. I could see longtime fans of the character wondering why she's so down on herself, why she thinks calling for backup is panicking, when it's just kind of a smart move, and probably thinking it's dumb of her to avoid calling the Fantastic Four because of some bad date with Johnny Storm. She does seem unusually uncertain for someone with her time in defense, intelligence, and beyond. As for Crew, he is an interesting mystery. Doesn't have any dialogue, but does possess an array of abilities at his disposal to get what he wants, and will apparently show up again later. Perhaps it's not so outlandish that, for all of Danvers' adventures, this is a very unusual threat for her, but there is a sense like someone of her experience should react and behave a little differently. But again, as uninformed as I am where most Marvel characters can be concerned, take that with a grain or two of salt. Maybe it gets explained later in the series, but there's no immediate connection between her desire for self-improvement and needing a publicist, especially one that says she's a big fan of someone whom she barely lets get a word in edgewise. Yeah, I'm sure there's meta-commentary there too. It did strike me as a little ridiculous at first, but the more I thought about it, publicity would be able to shape how the public views a superhero. We have a positive example with Superman and a negative one with Spider-Man. Both heroes do their best to help others stop the bad guys, but get reported on very differently, and thus citizens will look at them differently. Heck, back in the second Spider-Man-Superman crossover, Wonder Woman bought into the junk said about Spidey when they crossed paths, and the people of Spalding didn't even recognize Carol. They just assumed she wasn't up to snuff. So for better or worse, cultivating the right image could assure people that when they see Miss Marvel on the scene, they know they'll be in good hands. Though she's been a long-time member of the world-famous Avengers, so how is she so unknown? Lorraine Newman was going to play her in an SNL skit, and she was so convincing, a couple of goons thought she was Miss Marvel. How much more famous does Danvers need to be? But even with acceptable rationalizations, the whole publicist angle feels, at least to me, like the kind of corny drama you'd get from a CW show. It could be that eventually the creative team bring us some insightful critique and criticism of this kind of narrative twisting, even if it is to make a heroine look better. Or perhaps down the line, Carol realizes she doesn't really need Sarah Day and will let her actions speak for themselves. Though I did read the next two issues after this, and some in the public are blaming her for the destruction of that city, so that would end up being its own double-edged sword. If she's going to get blamed for stuff going wrong while trying to help, maybe she should add webs to her costume and start going by Spider-Marvel. Mostly, I enjoyed the art. There is that one panel or two that looks a little weird for some reason, and sometimes they drew Carol's costume a bit more revealing than I recall seeing in other instances. Not as much as has been featured on this show, but enough that it seems needlessly impractical and just trying to add some sex appeal for the sake of sex appeal. Poses and camera angles didn't lean too much in that direction, though, so I don't think that they were being particularly self-indulgent, as some artists can be. There's a lot that can be done with the elements of self-worth, popularity, and personal growth this story brings up. The arc doesn't resolve them here, and more familiar readers may scratch their heads about this, but then it's probably something she's supposed to experience over the course of many more issues. I didn't think these books were all bad, but I couldn't help but feel there was some things missing. Or maybe I'm just crazy. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.